I'd like to recall this meeting to order. And all those that are willing and able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Republic, which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll start with some introductions. Good evening, I'm Diane McBride, Board President. To my left.
Bo Wright, Superintendent of Schools.
George Day Marteau, attorney for the district.
Good evening, Anne-Marie Straczynski, board member.
Hello, Rachel Sherman, board member.
Pat McHugh, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and School Accountability.
Good evening, Dina Wilson, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction.
Hi, Andy Whitmore, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations.
Welcome, Nelena Selm, Assistant Superintendent of Student and Family Services.
Hello, Doug Rivers, board member.
Hi, May Abdullah, board member.
Hi, Evangelina Mack. I'm a junior at the high school, student representative.
Ariana McKnight, Student Council Board Representative.
Good evening, Jennifer Laird, board member.
Hi, everyone. Karen Flanagan, School District Clerk.
Good evening, Scott Adair, board member and vice president.
Great, thank you, everyone. Agenda review. I've not been asked to add anything to the agenda. Any changes? So the agenda will stand as printed. And announcements, I will make this announcement. I'm understanding that the live stream is not happening. It is being recorded. There is an issue with the connection between sound and the videographing that's not allowing it to be live streamed. So we will record it and it will be posted tomorrow morning. So our apologies to the folks that normally would be watching it with us live. This brings us to our board member report from our student representatives.
Thank you. Student Council is kicking off the year brainstorming new ideas to improve the school community. These include renewing school spirit, working to improve the environment, and generally finding ways to give each class a great year. I am joined by our new Student Council representative, Evangelina Mack, who will discuss the new environmental effort that we are working on.
So one idea that the Student Council officers are discussing is encouraging students to be a part of a youth activism climate change week, where each student interested takes an action step to combat climate change. Each day presents a new idea for the action project and a way to take steps to preserve the environment.
Student Council is really looking forward to inspiring change this year and making necessary adjustments to the school community to better the students and staff. We are happy to be fully involved in the school community and will begin having group meetings very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. It's great to have both of you here with us, and we look forward to working with both of you. And as I mentioned to them out in the audience, it really is important having your student voice here at the table. We really want to hear what you are thinking and what you're doing. It really helps us at the table. Thank you. All right, this brings us to public forum. We have 15 minutes on the agenda for items that are not on the agenda. If there's someone in the audience that would like to speak, we ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. I have not received any cards, and by the looks of my audience, I don't think there is anyone that would like to speak this evening. All right. Then we will move forward to our consent agenda items for routine matters. I will take a motion. Anne Marie, second by Jennifer.
Point of order, Madam President. I would like to be able to abstain from item 7D. That's the action pertaining to approval of CSE, CPSE, the special education recommendations. And that's, as previously stated, until I have more information about our special education process. I don't feel comfortable voting on that,
All right,
if you would.
I can break those into 7A through C, and then we'll do 7D alone then.
Thank
Everyone
you.
good with that? Okay. So the motion now is for us to do 7A through 7C. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Item 7D, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So that's 601 on that. All right. For personnel actions, we'll take item A. I'll take a motion to approve those. Anne Marie? Jennifer? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. This would be item 8B, action pertaining to the approval of personnel actions addendum.
So moved, Madam President.
Okay. Scott Adair, second by Doug. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. This brings us to the action pertaining to the approval of a memorandum of agreement with the RHA Coalition Unit, Bus Drivers Chapter, enabling the district to expand its use of drivers from contract transportation companies to address the bus driver shortage. I take a motion to approve. May. And second by Anne Marie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. This brings us to the ratification of a collective bargaining agreement with the Rush-Henrietta Employees Association Teachers Chapter. I take a motion to accept.
So
Mr.
moved,
Adair.
Madam
Second?
Second. Anne Marie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. This brings us to the administrative position proposal. I'll take a motion to accept. Anne Marie. May. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry. Were you going to make a comment? Okay,
Nope.
sorry. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. This will bring us to our workshop on the Good Shepherd Capital Project. I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent, who I know is going to turn it over to other folks.
Yes, thank you. As you're aware, we are proposing to do a significant project later on this year. We discussed the access road and field turf component at one of our summer meetings, and we'll be revisiting that topic a little bit later in the agenda as we consider the seeker approval, which is the environmental impact component of that particular part of the project. As discussed, we wanted to separate the conversation around Good Shepherd and the potential use of this building as part of the other project component. And so the last time we had a conversation specific to Good Shepherd, the board asked our team to gather more information, to speak with the people that would be directly impacted, that group being the students in this building, the staff in this building, and staff members out at Good Shepherd. So Andy and I were a part of some focus groups so that we could get feedback from those different constituents. We also administered a thought exchange in mid-June, just before the close of the school year, in which over 300 people, I believe, participated. Actually, sorry, I had my thought exchanges mixed up. About 200 people participated. But nevertheless, we were able to get some good feedback there. And we're in a position tonight where we have some potential options for you to consider. You don't have to take any official action related to Good Shepherd tonight, but similar to the conversation we had over the summer, we will need to get some direction from the board around how to proceed with the three potential options that we're going to ask you to consider. So at this point, I will turn it over to our team here at Rush-Henrietta. We also have some of our friends here from Labella Architects who will be supporting tonight's presentation.
All right, thank you, Bo. Yeah, with us tonight we have Joe Curie and Lindsay Davis from Labella. So they've done a lot of the design work for both the turf fields that you saw last month, as well as what we're going to look at tonight. So they'll be presenting some of the details. Then we also have David Kay, our district architect, and Ken Nelson, our district facilities director, and Geraldo Torres with us tonight. They've all been involved in the design and development of this project. So last month, what we looked at was the high school piece of it. So the fields in the high school and what we can do with that. What we're going to look at tonight are the options to the right, the Good Shepherd property. So that's the parcel the district purchased about 4 years ago because we were leasing the old school facility for our community programs, and it also opened up possibilities for athletic space. So what we're going to do tonight is provide the board 3 different options. As a reminder, the one option that was included in the proposal last month, but this will bridge it, is the connector road. So the turf field proposal that the board approved last month does include the connector road. And those of you who had kids at the high school this week knows how important that is. With the drop off the first day, there was a lot of congestion. So there's a lot of desire for this connector road. But then that leaves us the rest of the parcel to develop. So with this, I'm going to have Joe Curie and Lindsay Davis. I'm turning it over to them because one proposal that we have is to build a new facility on that site, which would free up where the current school building is, would free that space up for athletic fields some point in the future. And it could house both our community programs and our alternative high school. So with that, I'll turn it over to the experts.
Okay, thank you. I'm Joe Curry, and Lindsay Davis is with me. Of the 3 options for the site, this is obviously the most ambitious, where we're considering construction of a new building. As Andy mentioned, the connector road that's part of phase 1 sort of forms the foundation of what we're able to do with the rest of the site. And for anyone who was not here last month, just a reminder, the connector road connects the west parking lot from Sperry High School out to East Henrietta Road. So I don't know how well, I know everyone can't really see the screen very well. Do you have the drawings in front of you? Okay.
We have the PowerPoint in our...
Okay, good. Then I'll try to, instead of pointing with a mouse, I'll just try to verbally describe the stuff. So this slide obviously shows the entire Good Shepherd site with a conceptual plan for our new building and related site development. The East Henrietta Road is on the left side of the drawing. The connector road is at the top. The existing Good Shepherd School is sort of the bottom center, and then the new building is obviously the colorful H, like inverted H shape in the upper left corner. A potential sports field is shown ghosted in on the right side. It's sort of the light green large rectangle. This could be a multi-sports field, but I will just mention that's envisioned as like a future potential development. It's not really part of this project or the budget for this project, but what we try to do is plan the site to allow you, maximum flexibility in the future. if you should decide to do that. So there are a number of constraints that we were dealing with when looking at how to develop the site. The first of these is that originally the school district purchased the entire property. In the interim, the church and the what do you call it, farmhouse, yeah, have been deeded to the town, and we've kind of shown that on here with them, the proposal for a new parking lot for just their property. It's sort of in the center left side of the site.
This is the town piece, and their vision is to put a parking lot in at some point, but that would also connect up to this.
Yeah, and when that was being parceled off, we worked with them to kind of come up with what intelligent and large enough parcel would be so that they could properly develop it with a parking lot. Additionally, although we're not technically restricted because it's state property, we did try to follow typical town setback rules. Our new building does not extend out beyond the church if you were driving along East Henrietta Road, so we wanted to maintain visibility of that and be good neighbors. Additionally, we kept a little bit of a distance away from the property line. This makes it easier to build. We have less concern about fire ratings and things like that. So we have sort of a little offset from where their property is. And then finally, in talking with the town, they expressed their interest in sort of sharing parking resources. So if they have after hours evening events that require spillover parking, they have the ability to share a little bit with the school parking lot, and there's a little connector road that connects their lot with ours to facilitate that. Another constraint on the site is an existing sanitary sewer line, which we're able to relocate. It's maybe a little hard to see, and I wish I could point it out, but there's like a red dashed line that's shown just snaking around the right side of the new school building. We were able to find documentation of that. It's like, 80 years old, and it serves about 10 properties to the north of the site. If we were to do this, step one would be to sort of relocate that sanitary sewer, but it is entirely doable, and the town is on board with that. And lastly, the last constraint is one more of a temporal nature, I would say, in that we want to keep the ability to run the existing programs at the existing school building while the new building would be constructed. So we've located the new building entirely outside the footprint of the existing school. We have 2 points of parking and bus access, so really this could be operational, or the existing school could be operational during the entire time the new building is constructed, and then when the new building were ready, people could move in, and then demolition of the existing school would start. Lindsay will talk more about the spaces of the building in a moment, but just to recap in case you don't know, the first floor is generally going to be housing the universal pre-K program, cub care for vacation days, infant care, adult English language learning courses, etc. And the second floor would be for the alternative high school. So the students and staff that are in the east half of this building would have the second floor and part of the first floor of the new building. Also a life skills center and the academic support center would be in this new building as well. So from East Henrietta, there are two main access points. At the north end, where the connector road meets East Henrietta, there'd be a traffic signal. That would generally be the bus entrance. Buses would come in to the site, make a right turn, and there's bus queuing space on the right side of the building. There are two separate and distinct entrances to the building. For the first floor, Universal Pre-K, it's at the south end of the building, and the alternative high school is right next to the bus parking area. For parking, staff could enter, parents and staff really could enter at either entrance. I'm assuming staff would come in at the south entrance, use that parking lot. For parents, they could come in there, and the idea is that they would drive through the parking lot and then sort of loop around, and if you can tell, there's like a separate, smaller parking lot right in front of the south entrance to the first floor, and that's envisioned for the. Oh, thank you, Andy, for pointing that out. It's that area where you're pointing. So the idea there is that there's like a semi-separated area where parents can come in when they're, a lot of them will obviously be escorting students into the building. And it's a smaller lot, it's more controlled, and there's basically immediate access to a sidewalk from your parking spot. So if people feel more comfortable, they can get out of their car and immediately get on a sidewalk and not have to worry about, corralling little ones with other cars pulling through. Yeah, and I think I'll turn it over to Lindsay now, and then once this is complete, then the existing building could be abated and demolished, and then final areas of parking completed. Oh, you're on my phone.
I say. Okay.
Oh, this is just the second floor shown on the site. And then this is enlargement of the floor plan.
So on this slide, we have some conceptual plans for the education building. On the left-hand side is the ground floor level. So to the south, like we mentioned, there is a dedicated secure entrance for the...
I apologize. I'm having trouble hearing you. Maybe a little closer.
Better? Or, okay, sorry. So on the left is the ground floor plan of the building. So as we were saying, there is a dedicated secure entrance to the south of the building at the drop-off for the Universal Pre-K and Cub Care programs. Having distinct spaces for the programs was a high priority item, and the number in this plan matches the current number of spaces housing the programs offered by the district currently. Each classroom is 550 square feet and has its own dedicated toilet room, and there are playgrounds adjacent to the building. The plan allows for dedicated childcare and infant rooms, a library, and access to a shared gymnasium and nurse office if required. The alternative high school has its own separate secure entry nearby on the east side near the bus drop-off. On the ground floor level is that shared gymnasium and nurse office, like I mentioned before, as well as some small locker rooms, and a gymnasium, which is sized to be able to contain volleyball and half-court basketball. There is also a dedicated fitness center, similar to the program that they currently have in this building. There is a space that is dedicated for the life skills program that's offered by the district, and there is also a room in the northern corner that we labeled ISS, and that would house the academic support center that's currently in Webster. The plan on the right is the second floor, And most of the alternative high school program is located on that level, with dedicated subject classrooms comparable to their existing program here at Webster. It contains a large multi-purpose gathering space that could act as a cafeteria for students, and the administration and counseling for the program is located with the students on the second floor. There are large male and female restrooms, as well as individual restrooms near the multi-purpose space, and we provided a lounge space for the students similar to the one at the high school now. We have also, after discussing with the district, provided space for a community food pantry on the first level, or on the ground floor, and there's also a garage for the driver's education program. So this is a conceptual arrangement of spaces and their size to help show the feasibility of the project and come up with a reasonable working concept.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, can you show me on that where the entrance is for the first floor and second floor? I don't,
Oh, on this drawing,
Yeah.
the two white arrows that are part of the left.
Oh, those are the
Andy's pointing them out.
So which one's the first floor entrance?
Well, they're both on the first floor, but the southern one, the one at the bottom, is for the UPK program that's close to the parent drop-off. I actually can back up to the site plan. That might help illustrate it a little bit. You can still see the arrows. The one almost in the middle of the drawing is the entrance to the UPK program, and then higher up on the right side is the alternative high school entry.
Thank you.
Sure.
It looks like the stairway for the second floor is right next to that, Doug. I think that's what you were looking
Yeah.
for. How do you get there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
there-
exactly
there's a
what I was
stair-
thinking. How do you get there?
Exactly. There's a stairway and an elevator right by the entrance.
Oh, I was going to ask about an elevator. There is one drawn in?
Yes. I don't know that we have it labeled. It's right next to the stair.
Could you compare for me the size of this gym compared to the one we're in?
It's actually a little bit larger than this one, if I remember correctly. It's pretty comparable in size. It's just better size for current requirements for volleyball court and half-court basketball.
And was volleyball like a request that the alternative high school made?
No, we just wanted to have a gym that was sized correctly to accommodate. Really, half-court basketball is slightly bigger, but I think with volleyball, we needed an extra foot or two in one dimension. So rather than have something that's just slightly too small, we thought it would be worthwhile to just hit that milestone.
So potentially it could be used for a community group if they wanted to rent it out. They would be able to then have volleyball.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
Okay.
How many students for UPK would this house, and how does that compare to how many UPK students we have now?
We have created the same number of spaces that they have now, and we believe that the current population that they serve would fit well in this program. The actual spaces might be smaller than what they're used to, but what they seem to look for in the focus groups was not only enough space, but enough dedicated rooms to run different functions at the same time, or to be able to separate things off or have one room furnished differently than another, for instance.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the classroom sizes are smaller than what they have now,
Correct.
but it would serve the same number of students and not allow for growth in UPK program? It's a dream of mine someday.
I don't know that we calculated down to the individual student. I feel like there probably is still a little bit of extra space here. The other thing that we have in these rooms that they don't currently have is toilets within each room, which is something that is a constant struggle for them now. So they have more space perhaps in my opinion, than they maybe exactly need, but this would possibly serve them just as well or even better.
Thank you.
So currently, correct me if I'm wrong, currently, not all UPK students in the district are housed within our own building. That we have community partners that are furnishing that space. So I would see that that might possibly continue, and that we would, down the road, be able to have more growth because we have more rooms.
You're correct. And I think one of the things that you'll have to consider as you're thinking about options is that I think the nature of early childhood programs will evolve over the course of the next 5 years, where you may see early childhood programs housed in our existing buildings. So that's something that you'll have to consider when you are weighing making that kind of an investment off-site, if you will, specific to early childhood.
Superintendent Wright, just a quick question, and I'm not expecting an answer on this tonight. So conceptually, program square footage space for all the programs that we have today that we would be moving to this particular facility if we were to build it new compared to what this facility has in it. So how much room to expand, or is there room to expand from that perspective?
If we were to hypothetically raise that building and build a new structure, as we move through the presentation, again, one of the things that you'll want to consider is this. As we met with people in focus groups, there was a certain degree of support for a new facility out there, but only if they were going to be able to get very specific things out of it. And there is the potential, I think it would be a beautiful building, and there was support for it also within the thought exchange. But there's the potential, if this is what you're asking, that we could spend in the excess of $20 million and move your adult ed programs out. Well, you continue to house your adult ed programs. Sorry, there's some bug that's like driving me crazy right now. That's why I'm swatting.
Wasn't the question.
Yeah, and they still are here. Like, they're not getting the message.
I
They're
see
just,
them,
you know,
they really are there.
they're trying to throw me off. So you could potentially continue to house the adult ed programs that we currently house out there, along with the early childhood programs. I think would only make sense in terms of justification if you were going to do that to move the alternative learning program out there. But the problem is the footprint isn't necessarily big enough to give everybody what they want. So you could have a beautiful building, but there would probably have to be some concessions that were made in terms of, what people are actually looking for out there. So again, something that we will have to weigh, especially if you're going to make that type of an investment.
I also...
We can't hear you.
My mind just goes to think about the UPK program means 4-year-olds running around, alternative high school students who might require a little bit of a quiet environment for them to learn. And that's hence the reason that they are housed in a separate building. And I just keep thinking about how is that going to be accommodated. I look at the building and it looks like it's a big building, but are they in this separate area where they are not going to be sharing any part of the facility? Are they, when kids go outside and play, the 4-year-old, is that going to create a disruption to the learning environment for our alternative students?
So there are dedicated separate entries for both programs, but the overlap could occur in, there's shared facility with the nursing area and also the gymnasium, which I assume would be a scheduled type thing where, one program has it between certain hours or they sign out as appropriate. There are outdoor playgrounds right next to the building, so I'm sure that there would be, noise of kids playing, and you can do sound-rated windows, you can do other things, but I don't think it's, you could never eliminate that distraction or stimulus or whatever you want to call it.
And just for history, May, those programs have been housed together before, here over at the Vollmer building. So it's the same kind of scenario that they were in the same building. And they were able to work those things out. I actually kind of like with the second floor, it's like, man, they're separated enough for most of what they need to do. But historically, they have been in the same building previously.
Along with that question, what about noise abatement? Just dealing with the noise kind of goes after what you're talking about, right? Is there consideration for transfer of noise from the second floor to the first to the second, to try to keep an environment that students can learn best in?
So I'm a little less worried about between floor noise. I think there's obviously going to be a concrete floor between the two floors. Sometimes it can also be a matter of floor finish. Like if you have a hard floor, then certainly footsteps sound. If it's like a softer, resilient tile, or some areas might be carpeted, there's be less impact noise. Right now at Vollmer, and I guess it's a cafeteria below. There's a cafeteria below some of the sixth grade wings, and I've got to think that that's a pretty noisy environment. But I think the concrete floor goes a long way to help that.
There's also, we could also do something like an acoustic deck in between them, which generally helps with noise traveling upwards. Not so much going down, but just another option that we could consider as we work on that.
The other question I have is, and it goes back to what you were talking about, Bo, how much bigger would it have to be to really make it work the way, where everyone will get what they want? How much, what are your thoughts on that?
I would defer to our architects, but what I would say is it's not that you couldn't make it work in the current footprint, but I think it would in some ways be less than ideal if we were combining those programs based on some of the things that they said were important in terms of room size and in this building, being able to incorporate certain features that they have here. I'll say that the staff members here didn't want to go anywhere. The students were much more open to moving programs for a range of reasons, as long as the building space was comparable to what they had here, and as long as they felt it was very important to continue to have some separation so that they continue to have sort of a nested program here. Some of them like the idea of being closer in proximity to the high school, which could potentially give them more access to opportunities within that building. But from a structural standpoint, I'll have the architect speak about what's possible and what isn't from a facility standpoint.
So we are, as I kind of outlined at the beginning, we do have a few site constraints on us, and we our sort of task, I guess, was one of the things we were trying to do is design to a certain budget. So we didn't actually look at specifically what would it take to have all 770 or 800 square foot classrooms. Just off the top of my head, we would certainly we'd have at least a bigger second floor. I could easily imagine that we might even need a partial third, because it would be tougher to expand to the south or closer to the town property. I mean, it's possible, but it gets quite a bit harder, I think.
Thank you.
So I think we'll answer some of your questions as we get into the cost piece of it. So for the new building, the cost is about $21.5 million. And the superintendent mentioned some of the constraints. The number one constraint is this building would not be eligible for any state aid, so it would have to be totally paid for by local taxpayers. As the superintendent mentioned earlier, it's very possible that UBK will become either a state or a federal mandate in the next few years. If it does, the only way we could transport those kids is if they were housed in each of the elementary schools. They would not be housed in this building, so if there's growth, the growth would be into the primary schools. It would not be an expansion into this building. As the superintendent mentioned, when we met with the alternative program here at Webster, the staff absolutely loves this place. They want to stay here, and the students were mixed. They were more open to it. Probably about half of them loved being their own safe space. The other half liked the idea of the proximity to the high school so they could possibly participate in more activities. Although the reality is now they are able to participate in activities here, but most of them choose not to. I mean, we do bus them if they want to, just down the road. But conceptually, they like the idea of being closer. And the UPK and Cub Care staff were not real enthusiastic just because of the space, the smaller rooms. People love their space, you know, and unfortunately the capacity utilization in the existing buildings is very low. It's very expensive space per student, but it serves the needs and they love their space. So even though it's a nice new building, it would offer many amenities that they're lacking now, especially the young kids with the bathrooms in the classrooms and more adult ADA compliant bathrooms. Overall, they prefer not to give up the space. So it's a very expensive proposition and probably would not fully satisfy the programs we would move into it. So the second option we looked at, what happens if we kept the alternative program here, because they're very happy here, and when the BOCES lease is up, we move out, we don't renew the BOCES lease, and we move the existing UPK and community programs over to this building. It would be a much more reasonable cost, about $5.5 million in total. This building was designed, I believe, as a junior high school, so there'd have to be renovations in the classrooms for the younger kids. We put in a new playground and some general building alterations, but for $5.5 million, significantly less than $21.5 million, we could move them into this building with a lot more space. And there again, none of this is state aidable. It's all local taxpayer funding.
Andy, I'm sorry, could you mention what the classroom renovations for young children would entail? I mean, would it get us the kind of amenities that the new building would have provided, bathrooms, whatever else?
In each, here, have a seat.
Yeah, the idea is that there would be restrooms and right-sized sinks, cabinets. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Sinks, restrooms, you know, cubbies in the classroom, that kind of thing.
So in addition to not being eligible for any state aid, we would lose about $400,000 per year in lease payments we're currently receiving from BOCES. However, the good news is this building also is not eligible for state aid for the most part. So we have two significant buildings not aidable, so it would get rid of one of them, which long-term would reduce our cost footprint significantly.
Andy, would it come anywhere near to offsetting the $400,000 of BOCES rent?
Oh, yeah, this is still the most cost-effective, even with the foregoing, the $400,000. This consolidating to one building would still be much cheaper.
Okay.
Andy, how much, if we move alternative ed over there, is this space going to be empty then, unused, or is there something that would come in and use that?
So if we went back to the new building you're saying and moved them out, BOCES would love to lease this whole building. They're looking for a middle school site. They love this building, the half that they're using, and they would be very, very interested in leasing the whole building. So that would defer some of the cost, but the problem is this building still isn't eligible for state aid, so the work we do here is not state aidable.
Thank you.
Which actually, very good question, Doug, because that's the reason we first came up with the concept of a new building and moving the alternative program over there. Economically, could we justify it by leasing out this entire building? And then the last thing, we don't have to do anything imminently for the athletic fields at Good Shepherd. And really for state aid purposes, we don't want to do anything in the next 7 or 8 years because the state has what they call a cost ceiling that resets every 5 years. So with all of the proposed athletic field upgrades that we're doing, they, for the most part, will be eligible for state aid, but they consume the entire cost allowance that we're allowed. And so we'd have to wait 5 years until that project was completed for it to reset. And that would be the time then it would make sense to do further athletic fields at the Good Shepherd site if a future board wanted to do it. So it would also be eligible for building aid. So if we do that, the third proposal is we leave everything as is. We renovate the existing Good Shepherd school building where our community programs are. For $3.8 million, though, this would just be the beginning. It would take probably 3 of these projects to really renovate to the level that would make it. It'll never be comparable to our current school buildings. The HVAC system was designed differently, the layout of the building, but we could certainly improve it quite a bit. And what you see here would be the first pass at it. So a new roof, it definitely needs a new fire alarm system. The parking lot, as it ages, it's already quite aged. If we were going to keep this longer term, we'd have to redo the parking lot, bathroom upgrades. We would do some LED lighting and refinish the ceiling to try and brighten it up. We would do asbestos abatement in the corridors and put in new flooring and new windows. So for $3.8 million, that would be our first pass. And then probably once that was done, we would propose another project. The whole electrical system in the building needs to be upgraded. In the summer, when they run the window air conditioners, if they then turn on a microwave, it trips a fuse. You know, the system was not designed for today's electrical needs. But longer term, the original vision of the board when they purchased this space was to enable the athletic fields. So those are the three options, and I think, Scott, you asked about the square footage, the comparable square foot. Right now, the current Good Shepherd Community Building is 33,842 square feet. The BOCES wing has 27,759, which is less, but they're also sharing this gym and the cafeteria, so there's another 28,000 of shared space. So really, this would provide the programs that are there now even more space than they have. The new building would be for the UPK programs, and the other community programs would be reduced to $26,500, and that includes the shared space. So it's even more of a reduction than it looks like on the surface. And the second floor, alternative high school, would be 16,975 square feet versus the 24,900 they're in here, plus the larger shared spaces that they have here. So there's no, people like space, so the programs could certainly fit in the new building, but when you're used to bigger and you get put into smaller, even though you certainly fit there by any standards, they aren't happy and would not like it. So there was very underwhelming desire to move into a new building by both programs.
And Andy, where would the community programs, the food pantry, go if you went to move UPK here to Webster?
Well, all the programs that are currently there would move into the West Wing here.
Okay.
So everything that's there would move here.
Okay. Another cost question on my mind is when you say that it would be financially good to reduce from 2 buildings that are not state aidable to 1 building, what is the expected cost of that, the magnitude approximately of the savings?
We have not figured out that level, but it certainly each year would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because what you don't know on an annual basis is the upkeep. So for example, the roof we just put on this summer is over $2 million. We're gonna have to put on a roof at the other building for $1.5 million. So going forward, there'd be 1 roof you replace instead of 2. And as you can see, that just touches it. So it would be significantly less costly to consolidate to 1 footprint.
Yeah, I think just understanding that, I know it's a lot to ask for maybe in terms of calculation, but that net present value of that cost savings, I mean, it could just make it obvious, you know, in terms of the financial choice. I know that there are differences here in the financial choices, but it really could pump up the financial benefits of one or another choice.
I think that's a good suggestion, and that's maybe something that we could, as we sort of progress, we could work on getting those statistics for everybody so that as we're communicating with families and the folks in the community, they have a better understanding of just how much could potentially be saved. I think this evening, in terms of concept, we do want to get a feel from you as far as which option you favor at this point, looking ahead. And really, just to summarize, there's a really expensive option that does have some benefits, which is why we've been sort of investigating and seeing what's feasible with that. If we were to raise the current building out there and build new, but there's certainly some drawbacks. First and foremost, that it would be very cost prohibitive. The second option being that we move the existing programs into this building. That would be the most cost-effective option. And then lastly, probably, you know, while it wouldn't be very costly initially, I shouldn't say wouldn't be very costly, but by comparison, wouldn't be as costly in terms of doing some renovation to keep that building that exists out there limping along. But as Andy said, the long-term cost of trying to keep that building limping along would be significant over time. It already has been somewhat significant when you look at just the past few years in terms of replacing the heating system and some of the other just basic renovations that we've had to make, because it's a very, very old building that wasn't necessarily designed for our purposes. So I just wanted to say that as you consider what you think to be most palatable moving forward.
I have another question. As we're talking about the possibility of state and federal mandating UPK for all our kids and talking about putting them in the elementary buildings, my thought went to, we don't have space for all those kids. So really, I guess I'm thinking, what would it be that it's just a thought, if we're not adding a new building, not doing anything to that one, we would have to add on to our current elementary buildings. Would that be state aidable if we had to do that piece?
Probably not, because by state standards, our class sizes are much lower than the class size.
Okay.
So there'd be two options. One option would be increase the class size, the board directives on class size. The second option is look at attendance areas. We do have a couple primaries that are underutilized, but certainly then the third option would be additions on some of the buildings.
The other thing to consider is this. I do think there's a strong possibility that many of our early childhood programs will move into school buildings, but I also don't foresee a situation right away where that means we would no longer have programs or classrooms and outside programs either.
Yeah. Sorry, just a bunch of scrambled thoughts of...
Yeah, there's so many variables. But just to get your head around the financials, one of the questions that came up last month was, what is the funding for these? So the top portion here is the same for all of them. These are the funds we have available currently as we speak. So the 2016 capital reserve has $7.4 million left in it. The 2020 capital reserve has $14.7 million. And this year's budget included a transfer to capital for $4 million. So that gives us $26.1 million of current funding for capital projects. The athletic fields that were approved last month are $10.5 million. So that would be the first use. We also discussed and the board expressed interest in looking at more significant pool renovations and upgrades and auditorium LED lighting and sound upgrades. So a very rough estimate of those is $2.5 million each, but that we definitely need more work on the engineering side to get closer. But the rough estimate is $2.5 million each. So those funds are pretty much allocated per the board directive from last month. And then we have the three options. So the first one is the $3.8 million just for renovating the current community program building. But even though this uses the lease funds, that would still leave us with $6.8 million for future projects, which we do them every summer. That $3.8 million, you're going to have to repeat that every few years until that building's fully renovated. The second option is moving to this building from the community programs, moving them here for $5.5 million. So that would give us about $5 million remaining. And then the third option, building the new building, we'd be $10.8 million short. So if we were to go forward, we'd have to ask the district voters to approve a bond to pay for that. So it would be repaid by 100% by local taxpayers over the life of the bond because it's not eligible for any state aid.
Andy, if I may just correct one of the things in what you said. I think the last board meeting, the board was clear to have not made a decision on how to potentially fund the athletic fields and Connector Road, and there was a discussion about the potential wisdom of potentially borrowing for some of that. So I guess I just want to say that at least with respect to my memory, and I could go back and look, I don't believe that the first, that first $10.5 million or so is the first, I forget how you phrased it, but that it's the money that would first eat up the reserves. I think the question of funding is still open from the board's perspective.
Yeah, the board always would have certainly have the option of borrowing for any of those three projects if that's what the board decided.
Andy, just a couple questions regarding the cost for these three different options that you've presented. Assuming that you were ready to go, these prices are based on how much of an escalation, because I know that the project's not going to start tomorrow. So how much do you have built in there for escalation and cost?
Is it 40%?
If we were, so we have what we call an incidentals number, which we apply to raw construction cost. Some of that is permitting fees, other things. A portion of that is escalation. I think for these, we looked at, just to keep it consistent, a 3-year time frame, 4% per year. Obviously, some of these could be sooner than 3 years.
Sure, yeah, and the 4% could be short too, as far as the cost goes, who knows, but just wanted to get that out there. And then in option B, the $5.5 million one, you have raising the building, the Good Shepherd building. What would be done there after it's raised? Because we're not doing anything with that space at that point in time. What's the plan?
Right. Short term, it would be a grass field. Longer term, it could be that the vision would be an athletic field, and one vision is another artificial turf field. It would be, which could house baseball as well as other sports, and that would bring varsity baseball back to the high school site. Right now, it's at the Roth Junior High School.
Okay, thanks. And that would then. So the $1.3 million of raising that building would do nothing for additional parking out there, correct?
We haven't refined it. I mean, we could certainly look at, I mean, we would most likely leave the existing parking as is.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate that. Okay.
So in summary, the lease with BOCES, the Webster Building lease, expires August 15th, but we have to notify them by January, this coming January, if we aren't planning to renew. Basically, we have to notify them either way, whether we're interested in renewing or not interested in renewing. So that's why we'd like to get some direction over the next few months from the board about which way we're going. So BOCES needs time to plan accordingly as well. Just a reminder, neither the Good Shepherd building nor the Webster building are eligible for state aid. So it's very expensive to maintain two buildings, and when the state's not paying typically 60% of it, it gets more expensive. And the new building, although very attractive, cannot be built with enough space to make the proposed users happy or satisfied with what they would like. So the alternative program feels they need the larger classrooms. Their kids are there for a reason, and they need space, safe space, so they prefer the larger classrooms. And the community programs don't feel there's enough auxiliary spaces for the different types of events that they hold. And the new building would not be eligible for state aid. Any further questions?
The pre-K, I mean, is there any direct feedback on their feeling about moving over here versus being over there? I mean, I know you did the...
Yeah, they would be quite content with moving over here. They like the layout, especially if we were able to refurbish some of the existing classrooms.
Thank you.
Are all three options require that the existing programs move here? So that means the BOCES lease has to end?
No, the one option where we renovate the existing Good Shepherd building, we would keep those programs
running.
Yeah, and then we could defer. We could renew the lease for 5 years, and then a board 5 years from now could come up and we reassess and go through the same thought process if they wanted.
Thank you.
Andy, is it too much to ask, I guess, maybe the superintendent, it's too much to ask just a back of the napkin swag at what the total renovation cost to get the Good Shepherd building up to speed would be? I know we're talking about 3.8 this year, but Andy's mentioned that there are other additional renovations.
I'm reluctant to throw out numbers, but
No, back of the envelope, I think my expert here would say probably about 3 times what the initial cost.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
There, David.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer?
Is BOCES you said BOCES is looking for a middle school. Are they actively looking for other sites, or are they waiting to hear something from us?
They know that it's probably unlikely we would give up the side of the building. If it happened, they would love it, but they know it's not likely. They would be in dire straits if we moved them out of the other side, but because we could delay that for at least 5 years, we could exist where we are with half of the, if we knew longer term we were going to vacate that building, the Good Shepherd building, but it had to last 5 years, we could invest $1 million and limp along for 5 more years, and that would give BOCES time to look for alternative sites. But they do love this location. The transportation from all the component districts they serve is much easier here than Fairport, believe it or not, because we're right off of 390, the thruway, and the school building. You know, it's a real school building, so they do love it. But we can't get enough in lease money to offset some of the other costs.
So are you looking for a roundtable? Okay, so I'm going to start over here then. Sorry, Rachel, I know you're looking at me, but I'm going to start here. So just at this moment, what are your feelings about the 3 different plans?
So just listening to what the survey needs are and looking at planning, I think we get more wins out of moving here, moving to the Webster building. If the new building was larger, I think I'd be swayed to go that way. I am concerned about how many kids are going into a classroom, and then how are the teachers going to manage that, even though there's bathrooms and all that. And making a class smaller, you're right, Andy, it's never easy to change a mindset like that, right? So when you have little kids in a smaller space, it just requires a different management style, I think. So right now, what's going on in my head is, where can we get the best return on the investment with win-wins? And I think, move to the Webster building at this point would be where my head's at.
I agree. The second option, where we move the programs here and giving this building the needed renovation, and maybe giving the students on the alternative high school what they mentioned they were looking for if when given the option to move somewhere else. They would rather stay here and give them what they need. I think this is the most cost-effective and for us right now.
I agree, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking a mandate coming down about universal pre-K, and where are we going to put them? So we're going to have to do work, either add classrooms or look at class sizes. So I think it would be more effective to consolidate, to bring them here.
And I know that I can specifically say that I'm not for the new building at this point in time. I'm still struggling a little bit between options B and C. I'm struggling a lot with option, I'm going to call it the $5.5 million option, with $1.3 million of that being spent on demolishing that building out there, which could have some purpose with some additional cost associated with it. So I feel like going with that without demolishing the building gives me some time to figure out some of these other things that are going on. But so I'm between B and C. I'll call it B and C if I have my lettering right.
Anne Marie?
I think moving to Webster makes the most sense, and just the little bit I know from the Good Shepherd building, I think that is really expensive if we're going to make it up to date and current with the rest of the buildings. I think, to me, moving to Webster makes the most sense.
Yeah, not to be redundant to everyone else, but I'm leaning towards B. My reasoning would be primarily twofold. First, thinking long-term with a capital project, I'd like to think about 20 and 30 and 50 years. And if it's not going to be a new building, and for some of the reasons that Scott has shared, I would be against a new building at this time with the current description of it. The second reason would be, maintaining flexibility, to then respond to future mandates, potentially to potentially increase UPK. I think flexibility is really important. The other reason would be thinking about it with an equity lens. I think that UPK and the alternative high school are two incredibly important programs to help situate some of our learners with special needs. And I'm thinking about the presentation I think we had back here in May or June before I was on the board, but I think it was about space. And they showed that the district is going to be serving more English language learners, more new Americans over time, that our elementary schools were going to reflect that mix more so. And I know that UPK is a highly valuable program, especially for our immigrant families and newer Americans and lower income families. So for those reasons, I would tend towards option number 2, moving all the programs here.
All right. I'm kind of like Scott. I'm kind of torn between the two, with a little renovation to Good Shepherd and moving everyone here. I think the space is really great to be able to do that. I think about tearing down a building that we have used historically as flex space when we needed to. We had additions going on at Leary, and we needed to use the space there for the kindergarten, and with reconfiguration we had to utilize that space. I always hate taking down a building that's there, and I think back to, and this is going to date me, the Gillette building. It was too expensive at the time, they said, to renovate that building, and they sold it, and here we turn around, we needed to have another elementary building, which would have been a perfect place. We wouldn't have had to build. So I get a little nervous about just taking a building down without really some good thought about that. Moving them all here is a really good option. There's a part of me that would like to do a little of both of those, a little renovation to Good Shepherd and keep, well, BOCES needs a whole building, but keeping the alternative. We've moved that alternative enough. They need their space. So it's a combination for me. I'd love to have a new building. Don't have a lot of maintenance for a really long time on it, major renovations. And but I can see the space isn't going to serve those programs quite the way they would like.
So to summarize, to make sure that I'm hearing you all correctly, so most of you tend to favor option B. There are 2 of you who favor option B, but also would like to keep the door open to option C, which I think will happen naturally, because it's not like we would be proposing to raise the building right away. So if collectively you decided to go in a different direction, the door would still be open to, I'm calling it option C now as well, the last option.
Yeah.
But no one is in favor of raising the building out there and building new. Sorry, Andy. Go ahead.
You're exactly right. We could renew the 5-year BOCES lease do minor, less major maintenance with the existing Good Shepherd building with a thought it'll be torn down at the end, but you could always change your mind in the intervening years if the need arose, especially as we find out more about UPK and what mandates and directives and funding we'll get for that program.
Oh, one of the reasons why I didn't bring that up was the asbestos abatement, and I don't know where we are. So in my head, taking that building and raising it to the ground would be the best because of the cost that would come along with all of that. But is there, I mean, if we did use that space for, say, BOCES or something like that for now, does it have to have any renovations done for safety reasons, for asbestos or anything like that? You know?
You mean the Good Shepherd building?
Yeah, the Good Shepherd building.
I will say this because I've asked the question myself. BOCES has no interest in leasing that space out there. We've had that conversation, but it would be it's because it's such an old building, and as I said, it really wasn't intended for our purposes. The physical space there, it requires a lot on a consistent basis, and so if we did keep it long term and we're going to continue to use it for programs, whatever they may be, there would be a significant cost associated with that over time.
So the second part of that is, if we're not using it, at what point is it considered abandoned if nobody's in it? Maybe you don't know the answer to that, but I know from a town level, you can't abandon it either, right? So what would that be? And maybe you don't know the answer now, but what would that be? And then if that's a situation where it would be considered it's not in use long enough to be abandoned, then what then? You know?
I would never make that recommendation. I think that if the board decides, I think you do, if you decide to keep it, I think it needs to be utilized, and you have to make the commitment to putting some money into it to make it user-friendly. If you're not going to put programs in there, then the recommendation would be that eventually you do raise the building and utilize the site for different purposes. One possibility, as Andy described, is to utilize it for athletics. Because if you did bring baseball to that site, then I think we'd be at a point where all of our sports were now here on campus.
Yeah, all varsity would be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a reason I'd like to see potentially the present value of those longer-term costs, because I just think if we saw that the cost of moving to Webster plus maintaining the Good Shepherd building approached $18, $19, $20 million, we'd all be saying, wait a second, maybe we do go with the new building. So I think at these, you said comparatively, but it's true, smaller dollars, you might entertain maintaining that flexibility for longer. But if it's true, you know, what Director Nelson is saying back there in Andy's ear about the tripling of the costs, you know, when you think about it over a number of years, then it may make the decision a little easier. And also when you go to the community and you talk about, you know, to Diane's very good point about, you know, that the building has been, we want to honor it in some way. It has been very helpful to the community over many years, and maybe there's a reason if it doesn't stay and it gets raised to, you know, document and honor and have a moment of thanks, so to speak, a ritual of some sort to say goodbye to that building. But when it comes to taxpayer dollars, you know, obviously we have to be really smart about that and good stewards.
Okay, thank you. This is helpful in terms of giving us direction with the project. And so we will move ahead, leaning toward option B, leaving the door open to option C, as they're being called now, and we'll also get you some more specific financial numbers related to those couple of options. And so this is a good transition into the seeker conversation.
That it is. So I'll take the motion to approve, and then if there's any need for discussion, we can have that. So I will take a motion. Anne Marie? to approve the seeker. Second by Scott. Okay. Any discussion? Go ahead.
So just a quick discussion point. As I read through the draft resolution that was in here, in the packet, I read, hold on, let me get to my spot. The high school campus will include miscellaneous interior building system upgrades and renovations. Was that the swimming pool and stuff, or was that something else, Andy? I'm like...
In order to open up the aid for all the exterior work, we have to do something internal. So at a minimum would be the pool repairs, right?
Okay.
So that was the thought.
Okay, okay.
What about the locker rooms? Will the locker rooms hopefully be encompassed as well?
Well, if the board decides to go to a larger project, they would be. We just put in all new lockers in the boys' locker room. The other one, so that project, but I think what Scott's referring to proceed with just the $10.5 million artificial turf project, we need a small interior project. So at a minimum, it would be repairing the pool. And then if the board decides upon the larger $2.5 million project, that would be the more extensive renovations.
Okay, how come the girls' locker room didn't get also upgraded if the boys just got upgraded?
I'll let Mr.
I don't want to get off topic, I was just...
I'll let Mr. K talk.
I think it's a great question.
Based upon conditions.
Mr. K?
We replaced some lockers that were just rotted out. So it was in-kind replacement. We did not upgrade them where we would go in and take the pole showers out, that type of stuff.
I'm sorry, can you take your mask off? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Here, sit and talk. So we did in-kind renovations. We replaced the same lockers with the same
okay.
lockers. They weren't the improvements where we go in and take out the showers and put in individual shower stalls and get rid of the, I don't know what you call them, but gang showers. Yes, they were in
Okay.
bad shape.
Okay, just curious, thank you.
Last question, Andy, that I had for you, and this is on the interested agencies, and I think it's a different term, and I can't remember what it is now. Monroe County DOT was not on the list. Was there a specific reason why they weren't included?
Lehigh Station Road and East Henrietta in that area are actually both New York State
Perfect,
roads.
thank you. I wasn't aware of that, so thank you.
All right, any other questions? Then I'll ask for the vote. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. This brings us to the next workshop on district priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I want to echo those sentiments as well. Before I turn attention to the district priorities, just want to thank the team for all of the work that they did on the proposal. We appreciate you. So you have this is a draft of the proposed district priorities for the upcoming year. As I mentioned over the summer, our intention is to propose continuing support for priorities centered on equity and inclusion, mental wellness, instruction, and special education. There's strong internal support for continuing to focus on these priorities. As you saw from the thought exchange summary, the majority of the people that participated, when I mentioned that there were approximately 300 people that participated in the last thought exchange, there were 300 people that participated in this thought exchange and about 200 people that participated in the exchange related to Good Shepherd. So good participation. Most folks were very supportive of continuing to focus on these priorities. I did share with you a draft that is marked up here so that you can see the proposed changes that we're making. One of them being to remove the numerals because people tend to think that once you number them that it's some sort of a hierarchy, and it isn't. So we're proposing to remove the numbers. some minor changes, for example, under mental wellness, where when we initially wrote this, we felt like this was an issue that was all of a sudden starting to grow and cause concern, and so we wanted to focus on it as a priority and put resources behind it. But because we've been doing this now for, I think this would be our third year focusing on mental wellness, we felt like it would be more appropriate to say that this is an ongoing need that we need to pay attention to. Some of the language that we made some minor adjustments under instruction, given where we are with different modes of learning. And then the special education changes we made based on specific feedback that came out of the exchange and people feeling like we needed to be a little bit more all-encompassing, both in terms of students with special needs and also they felt like the language was more geared towards secondary schools as opposed to elementary, so which is why we included language about K-12. But certainly this is a draft, and so we present it to you in that form tonight in the hopes that we can get feedback, make any other changes that might need to be made, and man, these bugs will not leave me alone. And then we would present it to you in a final form next meeting, and then you could consider adoption of the priorities for the upcoming school year. So I open it up for feedback from the board.
All right. Jennifer, any thoughts?
No, I like the changes, especially with the special ed, the language, and I like the ongoing mental wellness focus.
Okay. May?
I like it's a living document. It's evolved around the needs. So I fully support it and looking forward to adopting it.
Doug?
I like what's there. The only thing I have a question on, like career and college readiness, would there be any components that would be valuable in that, you think, or no? Or is this not the place for it?
I think that that's a conversation that we should be having. I know, based on the feedback that we received from you at our last meeting, that's something that we're going to be presenting on when we do our instructional update. We are proposing to keep the focus areas within the curriculum the same, which would be centered around ELA math and information and computer technology. So that's why we didn't put any other instructional areas in there. But what tends to happen with these priorities is that we will shift the focus areas as things become more operational. For example, prior to the pandemic, we were having conversations about taking ICT out as a focus because we felt like, so much of the instructional components were to get things moving initially with some of the infrastructure components, and then really focusing on the implementation of the ISTE standards and capstones, and some of those things are operational now. And then sort of the universe was upended, and we realized that there was still a lot more work to do in that area. So we decided to keep it on there last year. We're proposing to keep it on there this year, but going forward, if the board said that, they wanted us to change the instructional focus, then we could do that. But the proposal is still to focus on ICT in those other areas, given what we anticipate we're going to be seeing with needed focus on the basics, those primary subject areas, but then also a continued focus on technology as we're still kind of in transition with some of these blended models.
So if at all possible, go ahead.
No, you're on stage, go ahead.
So one of the challenges we have, putting my other hat on for business and industry is that, there's a great need for filling technical skill jobs, right? So STEM, and however you want to categorize it, even vocational programs, which could be considered STEM if you'd like. And employers that we work with do constantly complain that the high schools aren't putting enough energy into for preparation into the workforce, and then even college programs that are maybe a two-year degree for entry employment. So if there was something on there that could help, if we create a priority in that area, I think that would help get our students so that they're ready to go to work, right? Graduate, use all those academic skills that they're learning and or going on to college so that they could be successful, which then in turn turns into low unemployment, right? Turns into business opportunities, more people starting businesses. So for me, having that as a priority just touches me personally and the people that surround me. And then also as far as the kids, I want to see them be successful. And so focusing them sooner in those areas of interest would be of value, and then that expedites them getting into work. So that's where my head's at with it. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Doug, I have a question. Would you propose that that be a fifth priority, or that sort of readiness for these important career paths, or would that be nestled under instruction for you?
For me, they're different because for me, instruction is more academia. I mean, academia comes into it, but learning a trade or a skill or preparing for college, I guess some of them can go into that, but say engineering, right? You could have a program that is an engineering program that does more tactile stuff, building, just use that as an example where there's a master project, and then those skills are transferable into many different areas. So you're talking about physics and math, but you're doing something, not just sitting down and doing a math problem. Not that, I mean, math is definitely important no matter which way you deliver it, but it's more it's a more hands-on approach, because what we're really seeing from a business and industry standpoint is students don't have any of those skills, and I'm concerned about it, and people that I interact with are very concerned about it. And so a lot of questions are come up with the advisory boards that I interact with nationally and locally. And I think this is a great opportunity because when you look at Perkins funding and things like that, there's some money out there that can help augment some of these costs. There's a big push to put people into middle-class work, right? So anyway, so I think having that as another priority for me would be helpful to help my community.
Might I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Because we put this document together to, once we propose something as a priority, it means that we have a very clear understanding of a problem that we're trying to solve. We have some ideas in terms of solutions that we're going to put into place, and we're going to put resources behind it as well. Similar to what we did with mental wellness, when we were kind of going through the same thing where people said, I'm pretty sure this is an issue, and I'm pretty sure that this is something that we're going to need to address down the line, but we studied it. We took a significant amount of time to really study it and figure out, what are the issues around this area? What would we want to see? What actions could we take as a district? And then what we did was we proposed it, we talked about it, and then the decision was made to put it on as one of our district priorities related to mental wellness. But my suggestion would be that we study it this year and figure out exactly what steps we would want to take as a district. What are the issues that we're seeing? What are the steps that we might want to take as a district? And the other thing is, if this is an appropriate place to address that concern in the district priority, or if it should be addressed in another way, or if it should in some way nest under instruction, or if the board for some reason thinks that it needs to be a separate priority, then we could look at it through then. But I do think we need to spend a lot more time sort of studying what the issues are around that. I don't disagree with you as somebody that pays a lot of money to contractors that sometimes will take 3 weeks just to get there to give you the estimate to tell you how much it's going to cost. There's definitely a shortage and definitely a need in our district and in other districts to support those programs and to give our kids opportunity to have those skills. So my recommendation would be not to try and somehow squeeze this into the district priority because of what they mean to the district, what they've always meant to the district, but to study this over the course of the year and then decide what you want to do as you start to conceptualize what the priorities will look like going forward.
So if I could add one last thing for the board to think about. This problem has been happening for a long time, right? I mean, it's not like it just happened yesterday. We all know that. So if we could do that within the year, that would, sooner than later would be better. And if we could prioritize it, that, not this way, but make it so that there's a time limit to this so we can address it sooner rather than 3 years or 5 years down the road, right? I think that would be helpful, and I would appreciate that. So,
I do want to add my 2 cents here. I see what you're saying, and I wholeheartedly agree that we do look at this and explore it further. And I do appreciate you, because it's not just adding courses, we can just do that, but I would really want to be thoughtful about it because it's an equity issue, providing access for students who might not have the same traditional path as any other students, and having that added as a priority. I think that's, if you ask any parent whose child has different learning challenges, I would say, yes, I would love my child to come out of high school with a skill instead of me finding another source after they get handed that diploma, and then what else, what's next for them. So I do think it's a great initiative to add as a priority where it's gonna fit. I really wanna be thoughtful about it because, as I said, we can just add a couple of courses and feel good about it, but I do wanna see us taking our time and actually bring in experts. And we have someone in our audience who's knows a thing or two, Millie. So and other people in our community, they could be very great to tap on as a resource.
I wonder, would scheduling it for a workshop be a way that gets that level of study and thoughtfulness put behind this in the way that May describes?
Our intention was to include it in the instructional update in the spring, but if you wanted a separate workshop, then that's something that we could look to do. We would just have to look at the timing of it.
thank you.
Preference, Doug, can we include it with the instructional piece? It gives them time to study it and get some deeper thoughts and position.
I'm a data person, I get it. My only concern is having it lag, because what'll happen is it gets shelved.
We won't let it get shelved.
That's my only concern. So if you think, let me go back. Part of the workshop piece is I really wanted to see what we were doing, right? As far as programs, I know there's an engineering program, and I've participated, went to watch some of that. So I really don't know the depth that we get to, so I want to be fair and say I need some time to see that so I could speak knowledgeably about it. If you think, so I have to rely on your knowledge, if you think currently the way these 4 standards are that some of that's covered in an instruction for now, then I want to take the time to know that, learn it, and then I can be better educated to say, hey, maybe this change or maybe that change by the end of the year if that's what you think is best. So.
Well, I noticed there's this secondary program course guide for Assistant Superintendent Wilson on October 26th, and that's the only workshop for the evening. I wonder if that's either a second one there or a piece of this. It is mostly in the secondary world, isn't it?
I wonder if that could also be addressed during our school visits. When we go to the high school, I know we or when we go to a school, we focus on something. Let's focus on, see what they, I mean, that could also be a way to incorporate this, because I agree, it's something that really needs to get looked at, and the workforce is in desperate need of hands-on labor. So could we do, I mean.
I think that's a reasonable idea that we could put that into, because what typically happens, I don't know that, I know that you haven't experienced it and Scott hasn't, but with COVID, we haven't done a lot of the school visits. But what typically happens is that principals showcase certain programs that are happening in the building. So I do think that that would be an opportunity for us to focus on that. I just have to look to see when we're scheduled to go to the high school.
And just, I mean, and that's gives you a good opportunity too, because you get, I mean, like in the past, we've talked to students. Like you can go up and you can talk to them while they're, I know we were doing something at the high, any building. You can go up, you go into a classroom, and you can go visit and talk to the kids and say, hey, what do you like about this? Or, oh, are you having fun? Or, I mean, I think that would be a great place to do it.
I agree.
So I don't know if we can move from vocational education, if you're satisfied, Doug?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, well, does Bo want to summarize that?
So what I'm hearing is that we'll incorporate it into a school visit. The instructional piece is in March that Dina Wilson was going to present to us. So I think a combination of a school visit and that piece will give us enough then to figure out what we want to call it, if we want it to separate, and then we can go forward from there.
I think if I was to add one more to that, would be some, like Bo said, some kind of analysis. How can we analyze this, right?
Okay.
Because I think that's what you're implying, so that would be the last piece, so that, I mean, in the end, resources matter too, right? So I think, how do we do that, so.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Rachel?
Thank you. So a couple questions that I had. One on special education. You changed the word disabilities to special needs, and I wonder, is that with an intent to broaden this priority? And because we have heard parents come and talk about children with 504 plans, children with academic intervention. They're not qualifying for special ed, yet they're at risk of falling through the cracks. Is that an intent to broaden this priority to include those kinds of students?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then I wonder, is the title special education too limiting there? Should it be students with special needs or similar?
So we felt very strongly that we need to continue to focus on special education. And I would even say that you know, I'd like to see us really tighten that focus this year. So I definitely would not propose changing the title, but we did want to be a little bit more all-encompassing with our language as far as who's included and what the focus is, for that very reason that you described.
Okay, thank you. So I definitely support that broadened focus and that specific focus that you talked about, both. So with equity and inclusion, I propose a language change in that last sentence, which I know was added last year, and it's new, and it speaks to me in many ways. The one thing that doesn't is that phrase, safeguard equity and inclusion, and I wonder if it isn't more intentional just to say equitable and inclusive, so that the sentence would read, we must ensure that our programs, curriculum, and learning environments are culturally responsive and equitable and inclusive. The word safeguard to me suggests we're protecting the destination where we are, but I think everyone would say we're not there yet. We have work to do.
I'm fine with that if everyone else is, and I would say, if I remember correctly, when I made that change, that there were certain cabinet members that didn't necessarily like the word safeguard either. So I'm fine with that if collectively you are as a group making that change. Did anybody, did you capture that, Karen, what the change was by any chance?
Just taking the words "and safeguard" out, so it would be, we must ensure that our programs, curriculum, and learning environments are culturally responsive, equitable, and inclusive.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
All right. Are you set, Rachel?
That's it. That's it for me.
Okay. Anne Marie?
No, I'm good. I do like Rachel's change.
Okay. Scott?
It doesn't leave much for
No, it doesn't.
the taking. I will say I did appreciate all the thought exchange summary being provided to us. I thought that was good background reading for somebody who's not as familiar with the district priorities until this past year. Certainly appreciate the comments around the table tonight. Doug's comments regarding vocational education is important. I'm not sure where it fits. I'm not sure how it fits in here, but I know that we'll get to the right answer regarding that, and certainly respect Rachel's change to the language regarding equity and inclusion. I think that's a good change. The only question that I had, and I think I included this earlier on in an email, was regarding the topic of safety, student and staff safety. And I know that was in the thought exchange in a couple different areas, and I don't have enough of the history to know where that's landed as far as the district goes previously and why that isn't an item that's here.
Sure. Because we consider school safety to be something that is operational. It's embedded in everything we do, and and because of that, it's implied that it's already a priority and always has been.
Gotcha. And that makes total sense to me. I just it wasn't clicking with me, and when I saw the comments regarding it in the thought exchange, I was like, yeah, why isn't it there? But that your response to that makes a lot of sense to me as to why it's not. So thank you. I'm all set.
Okay. I'm not going to add anything to anybody's comments because they're all going last. They're all the same. So I appreciate, Doug, you know that's kind of my passion too. So we will not let it slide, so I'm giving you my word on that.
Thank you.
All right. So we don't have to take any action on that tonight. It'll come back to us in our next packet for consideration at that time. All right. I guess that brings us then to superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you. There are a number of written reports that were submitted for your review. The first being the student discipline referrals report for the second semester, the school safety educational climate data summary report, the probationary faculty list with tenure appointment dates, the Title I parent meeting notifications, the summer programs reports. These are just updates based on the programs that we offered students over the summer, a revised workshop schedule based on the feedback that you gave us at the last meeting. And again, I would just say that this is a living, breathing document. If things come up during the course of the year, the board has always had the flexibility to say, this is a hot topic all of a sudden right now. Why don't we add a workshop in a couple months to, review a certain issue or a certain topic. So I do see that Chris Barker is here, and I do want to give him an opportunity just to say a couple things about items A and B, just to give you sort of a very brief summary, and then if you have questions specific to those, then he can speak to them, and then we'll give him an opportunity to hightail it out of here.
Very interesting tonight. I haven't been in a board meeting in a couple of years. I'm Chris Barker, the Director of Student Management. Last year, I spent most of the year at the high school as the 10th grade assistant principal. So, and then this position was put back in, so thank you for that. I love the job. If all our discipline reports look like this, If you read this, I'm sure you have, it'd be a happy day all the time. So clearly there wasn't a lot of misbehaviors. I can speak at the high school level, of a place I've spent 8 or 9 years as an administrator at different times. It was very unique, and the student over there can probably attest to a lot of the things. Between all the plans we had, the social distancing, the masking, the classrooms, the cafeteria, all those things, there was a heavy focus on kids moving, being in classrooms. It was way too quiet in the building for me personally. Haven't been there where there was 1,200 kids there, that type of thing. But I will tell you this. I thought about this driving here, thinking our numbers were very low across the secondary schools. There was a lot more going on with the social emotional and the academic side working with students at the high school. I have never spent more time working with kids on academics because we didn't have those behaviors going on all the time that happen at a high school. I mean, it's a high school. So our counselors and social workers and assistant principals and teachers were spending a lot of time working with the kids that way. So if we could ever find the middle ground between working with kids with behavior issues and those types of things and the academic side, that would be great. So there were countless things going on that people would never know, especially on Wednesdays when the staff had their day of professional development, which was excellent, and kids coming into school on their own to complete work, to work with teachers. Who would ever think that the students would come in at 7:30 voluntarily to do work and get help? That was a phenomenon that a lot of people are like, they're not going to come. We went from 8 kids to 12 kids to 27 kids. And when I was home on medical leave, I had back surgery. I was looking at the numbers, and we had 55 kids coming in on Wednesdays and teachers. So that happened in all of our secondary schools. The counseling side, the emotional side, I think the counselors and social workers would talk about the high number of home visits, whether it was through Google Meet or Zoom, or we had people going out with masks on, socially distanced. Mike Palladino's behind me there in the hallway. He went a number of times doing home visits, trying to get parents and kids engaged and trying to find out what was happening. And that was happening 7 through 12. We never really had the time to do all of that, but they took advantage of the time to do that. So, you know, you see SEL all over the place, right? Social emotional learning and everything that we're doing. All these things were happening unbeknownst to probably a lot of people. You know, I remember someone said to me one day, the high school, I don't know what those high school teachers do in the morning over there. And I took a burn to that because I was watching all this happening from a district person put back into the building and saw all these things that were happening. And then you look at the discipline and say, well, they didn't have many suspensions, didn't have a lot of disruptions, well, for obvious reasons. But of course, that could have fallen apart too. So the plans were in place. Those things worked. A number of kids were struggling, and we had to figure out who it was and do all those things. And so there was a lot of work. So I wanted to reflect on that, and I could speak, I guess, intelligently about it because I was in the building. If I hadn't been in the building like that, I wouldn't have been able to see all those things that were happening. You know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we made it through it. You know, so these 2 reports, the second semester, you can look at it and see how low the numbers are, and you can look at the School Safety Educational Climate Report, which those are the serious incidents that we have to report to New York State, are stay the same at 0 or way down. We know that had to do with the hybrid models, the lack of students being there all the time. I mean, 400 at the high school compared to 1,200 at the junior highs. So all those were really natural consequences of what happened. So that's why you see this. I think it's a great thing. It should have, to me, I predicted that in my head that this is what would happen last year. So to build off of that, you know, the district in the spring, we had 37 volunteers for social emotional learning. Representatives of all our schools got together on voluntary time to start looking at PBIS, social emotional learning, restorative practices, merging all that together. So, I mean, I was here in 2008 when we started PBIS and that whole initiative. So now we're going to make a merge to social emotional learning leadership team in the district, coaches, all those types of things. So all that started in late winter, spring, while everything else was going on. So we've shifted to that, and we're getting ready to, we've already started it. Our building started with welcoming environments, affirming that, discipline number one, and working toward that the first week of school. So we had plans in place for that in each building. So that's a little reflection quickly about what's happening and my reflection about being at the high school. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on the reports per se.
I don't have a question on the report itself, but one of the things that came to my mind is, from a lessons learned standpoint, you kind of alluded to something, but how do we take the success of this and bring it to the current day? Like, what can we pull out of that and say we can transfer this to a building with kids full, or a building with all the kids in it, and use it to mitigate or lower or improve the current situation when we have everybody here?
That's a good question. I was thinking about all the technology we've had before this happened that maybe we didn't use all the time or as effectively. And Doug, I'll tell you one example that we can use right now. I actually used it yesterday morning. We used it with something. It was always a struggle at times to get parents to get them into school and to get them engaged, because we have a lot of families that are, blue collar on the assembly lines. They can't get out of work. If they leave work, it's their money. They give up their income. And that's always been a tough thing. When you have a parent, you need to come to school or we need to meet. So last year, the number of Google Meets and getting parents at work during their break time, or honestly in their vans, their cars, to meet with their student and a counselor and a social worker. Before, these bugs are all over the place.
Told you.
Thanks, Paul.
Before, you would have to spend a lot of time getting that all together at times with families. But when all of a sudden we could do video conferencing to connect with parents, I did like 75 parent conferences on Google Meet who weren't going to come into school. So I think that model and connecting with families and saying we have an opportunity to do this, especially when your child is struggling either behaviorally, emotionally, or academically, we have already taken that model and people are using it more. So, that was there to use, but I'll be the first one to admit I didn't use it a lot. But now it's common, for those things to happen. So I think we got to take that piece and use that, and also realize that we do need to connect more with our kids and our families around the things that are happening with them, whether it's academically or behaviorally. So that's first it comes to mind, that right there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for this information, and
Oh, you're welcome.
congratulations on, all of that work that you put in, because it didn't, it's not just driven by the reduction in students, because you had 40% of the students in the school environment, but you didn't have 40% of the discipline. You had 10% of the discipline, roughly.
Yeah.
Thereabouts. So what I heard from you, in addition to what you just talked about with the better use of technology to connect with parents, is also that Wednesday activity where, you were connecting with kids in smaller group settings around their particular needs. I wonder if that's also a lesson learned, that just it was giving them a support,
Yes.
Perhaps?
That typically, Rachel, would happen after school or at pockets during the school. But this, the great thing about it was we had that whole day, which you never get, obviously, to do that. But it also taught that there are a lot of kids who may present as not caring and struggling. They came in. So if you take that and put it into your mindset of working with kids, people said they wouldn't come, but they did, and they came a lot. So that's something to transfer during the school day, to try to do those things more.
Well, and with some of the federal stimulus money, I guess I would encourage, you and your peers and others, to be thinking on, okay, even though we're not going to have Wednesdays, I don't know, are there Saturday mornings? Is there Wednesday night? Is there maybe some opportunity to carry some of that into other hours in the week? And I also heard from you, parent in-home visits. Is there anything about that that, you know, made a difference here and that you might want to continue in some way, shape, or form?
Well, we've always done home visits by social worker, counselor, AP, teacher, if we had to make a visit because we couldn't get a parent in or we were checking on, you know, safety in the home, those types of things. So we've done that. I guess what I saw was more of it because we had to, you know, especially because we weren't seeing the kids, we were seeing them 2 days a week. Or if the kids were, I mean, the other shift was on the Remote Learning Academy where we weren't seeing the students other than on the video screen. We started going after that and we created a priority list, at least at the high school, of families we had to either go see or connect with. So I think home visits used to be kind of like a scary thing at times for some people, especially staff, to do it. We always go with a partner or partners. But I think this kind of showed, and I've talked to the social workers and the counselors at the high school a bit about this, it showed that it can make a difference, but you have to put the time into it. And in the scheme of things, once the school day starts, you know, if you don't schedule that home visit, sometimes it's really tough to get out of the building. So those are things that they're talking about, how to do that more effectively.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I don't think anybody else has questions
Okay.
for you. Thank you so much,
All right,
Chris. It's
all
great
right.
to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barker.
You're
Good
welcome.
to have you back.
Thank you.
Any other questions related to the written reports that were submitted for review?
I would just like to add, I did really appreciate, Dina, the summer programs reports. They were very informative from my perspective of trying to get up to speed on some of this stuff, so I appreciate the time that's taken by staff to put those together. It was good reading.
Kudos goes to the principals. They prepared all those.
Yeah, I echo that. I especially appreciated the summer program reports, Nerland. Thank you so much. And it was really nice to see the extent of the ENL learners who could come in the summer, as well as the program for students with disabilities. And I just wondered if you wouldn't mind telling me, were there any takeaways for next summer potentially?
We did do a survey of the staff who worked at both ESY and ENL. The two teachers in ENL already stated that they are interested in returning. They love the program, they love the kids, and some of the students they work with already, both at the 7-9. So we had one of the 7-9 teachers and one, the 10-12 teacher, so they collaborated. The same thing with the ESY program. The teachers, the related service providers that came to work with the students, even online, most of them indicated that they would return. So that's really hopeful for us because, as you know, it was very difficult getting staff this year, in particular due to COVID. And so it was really interesting that they loved it. They loved the students. And the students came. Their parents dropped them off for related services. And so they want to come back.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to see it grow if possible. I mean, the numbers seem to, at least for the one program, showed very successful pre and post-test growth.
Yeah, and this year we had more of the students coming on a regular basis, the ENL students, because we also provided transportation. And if you notice that we even had 2 schools who reached out to us because they felt like our ENL program was really solid and they wanted their students to participate. So we allowed 3 students from another district to participate alongside us too.
Yeah, I saw that. That's nice. I had one other written report comment, which is maybe this is potentially Dr. McHugh and Nerland tag team project, but the Title I parent meeting notifications. So I've been to one of those meetings, and you really can get, I think, rich input from parents. My question is there any thought into actually translating those letters so that we can get some, and in those letters saying that we would have interpretation available to get any of our limited English-speaking parents there?
That is not something that we have considered. We certainly could and probably should.
I mean, I'd appreciate it. I think, that kind of parent involvement, not only is it I mean, it's a requirement, right, of those grants, but it'd be an area where putting in a little more resources and efforts to see if we could bring some of the parents to those meetings would be an experiment anyway, and see if you can get some more parents to come.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And Rachel, I appreciate that, sharing that, because sometimes we overlook those little things, people who are deaf or, sign language, and trying to make sure we cover all those bases. So thanks for bringing that up.
Okay. If there are no more comments or questions related to the written items, I will transition here to oral information, which is going to center around the reopening of schools. I want to thank all of you, the people in this room, for all the support that you've given us to help us reopen smoothly. And I also want to give certainly credit to our administrators, teachers, staff members, and families for all that they did to get us ready. I had the opportunity to visit most of our buildings over the course of the past week or so, and it was a very smooth start to the school year. I think the preparation that took place this summer and the preparation that took place in those days leading up to school really helped us. And I will say that the energy in our buildings has been really positive. I think people are really happy to be back. And as I said, as we were marching our way toward the end of the summer and preparing for the start of the school year, I felt like, other than the fact that we have to mask in the beginning of the school year, it's going to feel very typical, and to this point it has. For the most part, the issues that we've dealt with in the first week and a half are issues that we would deal with in any year. Some bus runs that are a little slower than usual, a kid that hops on the wrong bus and we've got to, deal with that situation, a facilities issue here and there. Sorry, this bug, every time I speak, it comes back to me. Did I get it? We did have, opening day a facilities issue because we're doing some construction, as out at Berger. We're replacing their roof. We had some leaking out there throughout the course of the summer, that we were able to manage without kids in the building. And then day one, if you remember, we had that downpour, and that caused some problems in the 9th grade wing at Berger. But I thought the administration there handled it really well. The teachers and the facilities workers out there handled it really well. Ken Nelson and his guys and Andy, they had extra help there right away. So we did have to shut down part of that wing. We only lost one classroom, and everyone was really adaptive and handled the situation quickly, calmly, in a way that was appropriate. So those are the things that we would deal with in any given year. As you also are aware, we did have a COVID-related situation today at File Elementary. The Department of Health did have to quarantine a class because of a positive case and potential exposure. So we did send communication to all the staff that work in that building, all the parents who have children in that building, and then we also sent a special communication to those families who have kids in the class that were directly impacted. For reasons that you understand, I'm not able to go into detail beyond that. But yeah, that situation just happened today. And the Department of Health was pretty clear with us that we may see more classrooms quarantined this year, which is something we didn't do at all last year. The reason for that is because you have more kids in buildings, more kids in classrooms, and there's the potential there for greater exposure. I will say, I'll give credit to Dina and Marcy Mooney, the principal, how quickly they were able to transition to remote learning in that situation. That was the idea, to be able to pivot really quickly if we had to. And while it's unfortunate that classroom won't be able to attend in person for the next 10 days, they will be receiving synchronous instruction starting tomorrow. So that's a positive. But I did want to bring that up in this forum because it, probably won't be the last time that we have to deal with that situation with all of our students back. And then the last...
I'm sorry, on that front, I've read those guidelines about, and I know it's the Department of Health that makes the determination, the guidelines on whether there's close contact. I read that closely, and it's different as between children and adults in the room. And my question for you, and you don't have to tell me the circumstances of this classroom, is just to ask the question, are our staff clear about their obligations on spacing or their, best practices when it comes to spacing that I wonder, could maybe help potentially in future? I'm not saying I know, because I don't know what happened in this classroom, but I just noticed there's a nuance there, and I wonder, do our staff have all the information they need about what distancing they should be trying to keep?
Yeah, our staff have been very good about that since we've been back. I think last year they really tried to adhere to all those recommended safety guidelines. They're doing the same thing this year. It is a little bit more of a challenge this year, like I said, just because we have a lot more kids in our spaces. But they are aware of what the requirements are, and to the extent possible are trying to adhere to them.
Thanks.
I have a question. When a classroom has to go remote, we call it in the city pivoting. Are the teachers given a day to get everything together, or are they expected, if you close on a Monday, are you expected to start on a Tuesday? I mean, I know I have like an asynchronous packet, so we have a day. I mean, how do the kids know to set up the Google Classrooms? Was that set up before or prior? I was just kind of curious, because this is going to happen again if we have to close a classroom.
So we did have that conversation about whether or not folks would need a grace period, and we felt like it would be appropriate in the event that it's needed to give teachers a day of asynchronous activity if it was needed. But we also, in that first day, we would require like a class meeting so that everybody could log on, and it would give us an opportunity to go through sort of a test run. In this case, Dina worked with the principal, and kudos to that building because people were very well prepared, and we're in a position where we can start tomorrow. But I will ask Dina just to give some details related to that.
One of the things that we did work on this summer is we have a transition to fully remote plan that I drafted early July, was vetted by all our administrators, given feedback, so forth and so on, and we rolled that plan out as part of our opening day activities. We also have clear expectations for teachers regarding Google Classrooms and how we organize our lessons and taught kids from day one, how do you log on to a Google Meet, how to get into your Google Classroom. We have a clear set of expectations on how we upload all the class assignments that we'll be doing in person, in a remote situation, and so forth. Our goal is to make sure that our instruction is fluid and it can easily transition to both modalities. And when you apply a blended learning approach, which we've all been trained in last year, and you make sure you have all the mechanisms in place while you're in person, so kids are logging onto their Chromebooks. There are times they're using their different online programs that when you do switch to remote, it's seamless because they do these activities in class as well. So the good news is our principals did review those plans with their staff. Our staff has learned a lot over the last year and a half and was able to get everything up and going over the last week, and even a very young primary class is ready to roll tomorrow. Obviously, they won't be doing a lot of intense work tomorrow because we want to make sure that they're logged on and do the meeting, and it'll be a little bit of an abbreviated day. But the teacher feels very confident because we thought since it's so early in the year, even though the expectation is we can pivot from one day to the next because all our systems are in place. The teacher and Mrs. Mooney felt very confident. Nope, they want them in tomorrow. We want to get up and going with this. We're ready to go. The kids have already been in for the last couple days, so
Are they doing a
good to
Google
go.
Meet or Seesaw?
Yep, no, they're going to do a Google Meet in the morning, get everything else situated, probably do a couple little activities asynchronous, and then check back in. So, yeah, so we're in good shape. I think it's also important to note that all our assessments and curriculum is all web-based. You know, even our local assessments, we have put in a platform that we use called eDoctrina. So if students are in class, or if they're in a tutoring situation, or if they're at home on a remote situation, we are ready to roll. It's very seamless that we built over the last 2 years, so we're real excited about that.
Will there be flexibility? Because I know the NWEA window opens up on the 20th. Will there be flexibility? Because, I mean, I would hope that the teacher would want to do them in person as opposed to online.
Yeah, in this case, if we need to make some, change some timelines to our assessments in order to provide those students the opportunity to take those assessments in person when they return after the 10 days, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dean, I know the standards for attendance with remote learning had, I think, changed during the course of the year. What is the current standard for whether a child is attending a remote class?
I'll let Nolani answer.
What was that?
The
Oh,
attendance policy is the same. So the teacher tomorrow will take attendance as well when the students log on. So the attendance will be the same. There's no, because we were on a hybrid last year, some were in person, some were online. So we added some additional language last year to the attendance policy, but this year we felt confident that the students remotely or in person, we will be able to take attendance as normal.
And does that include that the child must have their video running, or is it up to the child? What's the rule on video?
Students, that's been an interesting debate, but we've tried to give students flexibility with that because if students are learning in their home, sometimes there are things going on behind them that they don't want other people to see.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a situation where the camera is never on and work isn't being done and it's obvious that the student is disengaged, then we have employed the measures that Chris talked about in terms of trying to get a hold of the parent, get a hold of the student, and we've handled it similar to the way that we would if a student was in person and not engaging in class and doing work.
Okay. I just want to make sure that if quarantines are, we're going to expect more of them, that students aren't able to just like ghost their teachers. I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, it tends to be more of an issue with the older kids that we have to address.
As a parent, I will assure you, I got a few emails from teachers saying the same thing. My child wasn't turning the camera on by choice, but they just wanted to make sure that they're engaged, so they are quickly to get in touch with the parent. So it doesn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, I got those too for my middle school son or junior high son. So, but just making sure that that's sort of wide scale our practice. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, just one more thing that I wanted to update you on because it came up at our last meeting. That's related to testing. Because as you're aware, testing for, not like pencil, paper, math tests, COVID testing, as you're aware, the governor has mandated that school districts test employees. Employees who are vaccinated have the opportunity to opt out of that testing. School districts are also required to provide a COVID testing option for families so that families that want to opt into that and have their children tested regularly have the opportunity to do so either within the district or within the community. We have some flexibility there. So we are in a position right now where we are structuring the process for which we're going to be testing staff. And as you are aware, so that's been communicated already. And then we also just sent communication to families just yesterday, letting them know that this option is available. We'll use this as an opportunity to gauge interest so that we can see how many families, what percentage of our families are going to be asking to opt into testing. And then once we have a sense of that, then we'll determine the how, the when, and the where of what that's going to look like. The idea is that across the county, we've been working with local health officials. The idea is that we would have testing up and running for students and staff by the first week in October.
Bo, can I ask you, so as you know, my views are more testing is better. I think it leads to a safer environment. It leads to the identification of cases earlier, gives more options, right, potentially to keep spread or what's the word, contact low. Wonder, I would be a family that would be inclined to opt in, and I know a number of families who last year opted in to the hybrid testing. And last year, when in the hybrid model, kids were, taken out of first period class. It took them 5 minutes. I even interviewed a few. I called a few families I know. What was that like? I asked them. Easy peasy, 5-minute thing. Is there any way you can make this easier for families? Because I think the requiring parents to be there is going to take a whole bunch of people just out of the running. And I even know of one family who said, I would have done it if it was at school, but if I have to be there, I just physically can't be there. They have multiple kids and just can't do it. Is there any way that it can be replicated as to how it was done last year, which I think was very easy for families?
It was easier for families, but it wasn't necessarily easy for staff in the building. So what we tried to do was to, and some of this will depend on how many families we have that come back to us and say, yeah, we want to do this. But the idea is to create the offering. Yes, it would be the responsibility of the family to get them there. But that's one of the things that we talked about, Nurlan and I, is for families that want to do it, but let's say they don't have a car or transportation is an issue, then Nurlan's office will make an accommodation. That's one of the things that I'll say about this district and her office specifically is that we pride ourselves on customer service. And we always do what we can to make accommodations for families when we can. And in that case, if you had a family, especially someone someone that approached you and said, I want to do this, but transportation is an issue for me, then what I would advise is that you just have them contact Nurlan's office, and we can make an accommodation for those situations.
Thank you. I think you're trying to meet me part of the way on my concerns. I appreciate it. And maybe what would make it just a little more transparent to the community would be in the survey, if you're willing to send it out and say that if transportation is an issue, right?